In the last few lectures, we have basically studied a classical method for the solution of multiple degree of freedom system, the method for the determination of dynamic response of multiple degree of freedom system. And that classical method was called as the mode superposition method, and that was based on the idea of uncoupling the equations of motion using modal matrix, in fact using the orthogonality property of modal matrix. In this lecture, we will study a different method for the solution of governing equation of motion for multiple degree of freedom system, and that method is based on numerical integration. It is called as the step-by-step direct integration method. In fact, it is not one method, it is a family of several methods based on different assumptions, and we will just study one of the methods which is available, which is easy and convenient for the solution of multiple degree of freedom system. So our basic target for this lecture is to solve this equation M matrix u dot dot vector, the acceleration vector, plus C matrix, the damping matrix, into U dot vector, plus K matrix, the stiffness matrix, into U of t, U vector, is equal to some applied force vector, let's say Q of t. So the solution of this equation, the matrix equation, and the order will be number of degrees of freedom by number of degrees of freedom. The solution will be performed using numerical technique, using direct integration. We have already studied this method for single degree of freedom systems, and the same method which we studied for single degree of freedom system, we will study here for multiple degree of freedom systems also, and that is Newmark's linear acceleration method. So it is the most convenient method for evaluating the dynamic response of nonlinear multiple degree of freedom system. It can handle nonlinear systems also, as you have seen here, and in the case of single degree of freedom systems also, you have seen that contrary to Duhamel's integral, the step-by-step direct integration procedure can handle the nonlinear systems also. So similar to the case of an SDF structure, the response time history of a multiple degree of freedom system is divided into many short time increments, and for each time increment, the properties of the structure are assumed unchanged. After each incremental step, the properties are updated in accordance with the current condition of deformation. If we are using this method for the solution of nonlinear systems, the K matrix, or for example the damping matrix, they can be updated after an incremental step. But during each incremental step, the properties are assumed constant. The method is also applicable to the case of linear multiple degree of freedom systems. In that case, it will become a very simple formulation. In that case, it is not necessary to update the properties of the system. So the mass matrix, the K matrix, and the damping matrix, all three matrices will be constant throughout the solution for linear system. So for linear system, there are several methods available for the numerical evaluation of dynamic response of multiple degree of freedom system. And the two common methods are the central difference method and the Newmark's method. In Newmark's method, we have the constant average acceleration method as well as the linear acceleration method. In fact, this is the one which we will be studying in this lecture, the linear acceleration method. For nonlinear systems also, we have the same two analysis procedures. We have the central difference method as well as the constant average acceleration method. We also have the nonlinear static analysis. We can solve for the static analysis of nonlinear systems using numerical evaluation methods. So let's start the incremental form of the governing equation of motion, which is the basis for the development of step-by-step direct integration methods. So in analogy to the case of nonlinear single degree of freedom systems, the equation of motion for the nonlinear multiple degree of freedom systems are: we have the inertial force vector plus damping force vector plus the elastic restoring force vector is equal to the applied force vector P of t. This is equation 1, which is our governing equation of motion, and we have to solve that using step-by-step numerical integration technique. So the incremental form of the equation of motion is this one. If we write the equation of motion for any time t and t plus delta t, and then subtract the equation for t plus delta t, um, that equation will be fi t plus delta t plus fd t plus delta t plus fs t plus delta t will be equal to p of t plus delta t. If we subtract the original equation of motion from this equation, we will get the incremental form of this equation of motion, and that will be this one. Change in the inertial force plus change in the damping force and plus change in the elastic restoring force will be equal to the change in the applied force. And delta Fi is in fact equal to the force, the inertial force at time t plus delta t minus the inertial force at time t. Similarly, the damping force, the change in damping force would be F dt plus delta t minus Fd at t. And same as the elastic restoring force, delta Fs will be defined as Fs t plus delta t minus Fs at time t. Now we will see that by invoking few assumptions, we can write the delta Fi as m into delta u dot dot. Similarly, delta Fd can be written as C of t into delta u dot, and delta Fs can be written as K of t into delta u. And those assumptions are the piecewise linear uh, assumptions. For single degree of freedom systems, we have seen that if we have a nonlinear relationship between Fs and u, what we can do is that we can assume that for time instant delta t, which is from t to t plus delta t, the relationship between Fs and u is approximately linear. And we can write the slope for the Fs, the slope at time t, that can be written as k of t, and k of t is the slope for that small time increment which is basically at time t. The difference between the original force at any time instant and t plus delta t, which means after a small increment, that difference is delta Fs. Delta Fs. So we can write k of t as k of t, which is the slope at time t. We can write it, we can write in fact this delta Fs as Fs t plus delta t minus Fs, and that can be written as the slope multiplied by the horizontal distance, and that horizontal distance is delta u. This small distance is delta u. So if we know the slope, we multiply it with the horizontal distance to get this small increment, which is delta Fs. Delta Fs. So this equation is the result of assuming that between time t and t plus delta t, the Fs and u relationship is linear. This is known as the piecewise linear assumption. Similarly, the difference between the force at t plus delta t and the force at t is represented here as delta p of t. So this delta p of t is the change in the applied force between the time t and t plus delta t. So we have seen in the single degree of freedom system case that this was the incremental form of the single degree of freedom system. And we know that if we invoke this piecewise linear assumption for Fs and u, and similarly Fd and u dot, we can write that Fs can be written as the slope at any time instant t times the delta u, which is the increment in displacement. Similarly, the change in the damping force can be written as the instantaneous slope of the damping force, basically the Fd and u dot relationship can also be nonlinear, and the slope at any time instant t, the instantaneous slope can be written as C of t, and it can be multiplied by the delta u dot, which is the small increment in the velocity of the structure between time t and t plus delta t. So by same analogy, we can also write delta Fd as the C of t, instantaneous slope of the Fd and u dot relationship, times the delta u dot. So they are equivalent to the assumption that the damping and restoring forces are linear within t and t plus delta t. So these two equations are the result of this assumption, and this is the piecewise linear approximation of structural system. So that's why we were able to actually write the incremental form of governing equation of motion. Delta Fi can be written as m times delta u dot dot, mass times the change in acceleration. Similarly, delta Fd can be written as C of t times the delta u dot, and delta Fs can be written as K of t times the delta u. If our structure is linear, which means that the relationship between Fs and u and Fd and u dot is always linear, and therefore the instantaneous slope will not be a variable, it will be a constant number. So this C of t will be replaced by simply the damping coefficient, constant damping coefficient, because it will not vary for a linear system. Similarly, the K of t will be replaced by K only. K will be constant for a linear system, the stiffness of the system. But if the structure is non-linear, then we have to calculate the instantaneous stiffness and the instantaneous damping coefficient, and then we can invoke this assumption. So for multiple degree of freedom systems also we can use the same assumption, and if we have the K matrix in that case and C matrix for example, we can calculate the tangent stiffness matrix at any time t. Similarly, we can also calculate the tangent damping matrix at time t. We can simply take this differential, that each of the term of the elastic restoring force can be taken, the differential can be taken for with respect to displacement at any time t to get the tangent stiffness matrix. Similarly, we can also take the differential of the damping force with respect to the velocity at any time t to get the tangent damping matrix. So using the same analogy for single degree of freedom systems, we can also write the incremental form of the governing equation of motion as this equation 5. So this term is in fact delta Fi vector. This term is in fact delta Fd vector, and this term is in fact the delta Fs vector, and this is the delta P of t, which is the difference or change in the applied forces. So the equation form is same, but now instead of K of t instantaneous slope, we have a tangent stiffness matrix. Instead of delta u function, we have now a delta u vector. Similarly, delta u dot and delta u double dot vectors will be there, and mass and damping matrices will be there instead of just one number. Similarly, we will also have a delta p vector now. So the same incremental form of the equation can be written in this form, and this is also the result of the same assumption, which is the piecewise linear assumption. So between a time instant t and delta t, we are assuming that the K and C matrices are not varying, but they are updated after a time instant t plus delta t. but within a time instant they will be just kept as constant. So we are basically assuming that the structure will remain linear between t and t plus delta t, but the properties will be updated after delta t, and for each time instant the properties will be updated. Now here we, in single degree of freedom system, we invoke a linear acceleration assumption. If you remember that we invoke this assumption that if we have at time instant t, if we have the acceleration u dot dot function of time, and t plus delta t if we have this acceleration u dot dot of t plus some increment. So this is the increment in the acceleration between t and t plus delta t. We assume that the variation of acceleration, structural acceleration between t and t plus delta t is linear. This is called the linear acceleration assumption. And this assumption resulted in a few equations which help us ultimately in solving the equation of motion. When we make this assumption and we calculate the results or implications of this assumption and put it back in the original governing equation of motion, we know that it becomes simple, and then we can easily solve that equation. So let's revise that linear acceleration assumption, and then we will just extend the same idea to multiple degree of freedom systems. This is for single degree of freedom system where you have only u of t function, u dot and u double dot t functions. But you remember that for multiple degree of freedom systems, we don't have one function for u of t, u dot of t and u double dot of t. We have basically the vectors for u and u dot and u double dot. So if this delta u dot dot is the increment in the original acceleration between time t and t plus delta t at any general time instant equal to tau, we can write the equation, the linear equation for a line, and u dot dot of any tau will be equal to the original value plus slope times the horizontal distance. So this is the slope and this is the x is value, x value. So at any time instant uh, t equal to tau, you can calculate any intermediate value of acceleration by just following the equation of a straight line. So this is the equation of a straight line, and it simply says that the acceleration response varies linearly during each time increment. So acceleration will be different for different time increments, but within a particular time increment it varies linearly. So the result of this assumption is very useful, that if we assume that the acceleration is varying linearly, we can write the equation, straight line equation, and then we can integrate that equation to finally calculate the variation of velocity, because if we integrate acceleration we get velocity. So this equation B is the variation of velocity at any general time instant tau. So u dot of tau is simply equal to the original velocity at time t plus whatever is the result of that integration, we call it as delta u dot of tau. So this is the increment in the velocity, and this is a result of that assumption. Basically we started with that assumption and then we take integral on both sides. Similarly, we can integrate that equation B once more to get the variation of displacement between time t and t plus delta t. And by the way, this equation B is a quadratic equation in tau, you can see here. So that's why if the acceleration is varying linearly, the velocity is varying with a second degree polynomial. And if we integrate it one more time, the displacement will be varying with a third degree polynomial, because you can see here that you have the tau cube term here. So u of tau will be equal to u of t, which is the original starting displacement for that time instant, and then whatever is the other expansion of the integral, we call it delta u of tau. So this is the increment in displacement. So equation B and equation C are the result of equation A, which was our basic assumption, linear acceleration assumption. But these three equations help us in actually solving the governing equation of motion. So this assumption basically simplifies our task of the solution of equation. So at tau equal to delta t, which means at the end of the time increment, because we started with which started with t equal to t, and then we go to some t equal to t plus delta t. So in between that, we just assume a local variable tau, but at tau equal to delta t, which means at the final point of that particular time instant, we can simply replace tau with delta t. We can replace tau with delta t. So if we have in equation B, if we have tau here, that will be replaced by delta t. Similarly, tau square will be replaced by delta t square. Here also tau square and tau cube and simple tau, this one, will be replaced by delta t. And that equation will tell us that at the end of that time increment, what will be the actual or total increment in velocity and total increment in displacement. So if we replace tau with delta t in equation B and C, we will get this equation D and E. So here you can see that tau was there, so it is delta t cube. Similarly, tau square is replaced by delta t square. Here also tau is replaced by delta t. Same in equation D also. Now, what we can do is that we can rearrange these two equations such that the change in acceleration and change in velocity can be simply you can say represented or written in terms of the change in displacement. Why we are doing it? Because we know the incremental form of our equation, that is m delta u dot dot function of time plus c delta u dot function of time. Let's say that we are writing it for linear system. In that case, c will be simple constant. Otherwise, it will be some c of t. Similarly, k of t into u of t equal to some p of t. So this was our incremental form of the equation. So u of t is already there. In fact, there should be delta u of t here. So delta u of t is already here. If we can write delta u dot and delta u double dot in terms of delta u, the only variable left in that governing equation of motion will be delta u, the increment or change in displacement. And then our equation of motion will simply boil down to a linear equation or a static equation. So here we rearrange equation D and E such that we have written this delta u dot dot of t I have taken on the other side, and delta u of t will be on right hand side. Similarly, this one also, delta u dot on left hand side and delta u on the right hand side. So both of the increments in the velocity and acceleration are written in terms of the increment in displacement. Now if we put this equation F and G in the governing equation of motion for single degree of freedom systems, we will be only having an equation where the main variable or unknown will be delta u, because delta u dot dot and delta u dot both will be written in terms of delta u. So delta u can be taken common and then can be solved, and the increment in displacement between t and delta t, t and t plus delta t can be calculated. So this will give us a way to incrementally solve the equation of motion for each time increment, and then we will finally get the delta u for each time increment. We will keep on adding it to the previous u and get finally the displacement of the structure. So the same equations which we have derived for a single degree of freedom system, DE and then F and G, the rearranged form of the same equations, we can also write them or show them that they are can be demonstrated for multiple degree of freedom systems also. The difference would be that now u of t will be replaced by u of t vector. Similarly, u dot and u double dot also will be replaced by u dot and u double dot vectors. So now we can demonstrate that for multiple degree of freedom systems also. And please remember that these equations, these f and g, are the result of the linear acceleration assumption. They are there because of we assume that the acceleration is varying linearly between time t and t plus delta t. So we can also demonstrate that for multiple degree of freedom systems also, the same delta u of t and delta u, the same two equations, which are in fact equations d and e, they can also be written for multiple degree of freedom systems. So this is same as equation d and this is same as equation e, but they are for multiple degree of freedom systems, same equations, and we can rearrange them in a similar manner to get these two equations. They are in fact equation f and g. The f and g equations, the same equations can be written by rearranging these two equations, and we get finally the equation f and g. This is same as equation f and this is same as equation g. So now we can put these two equations f and g. In fact, they are called as equation 7 for multiple degree of freedom systems. We can put them in the incremental form of the governing equation of motion. We have delta u dot dot here that can be replaced by this whole term, delta u dot dot. Similarly, we have the delta u dot here that will be replaced by this whole term. And here you have delta u already. This term will remain same. Now what we can do is that since delta u, these two are here also, we can combine all the terms which are having delta u, and whatever is the multiplier for delta u, we call them a modified or a different k matrix. Let's call it as k prime matrix. So when we put it back, we will see that the governing equation of motion will simply be reduced to this simple equation, and delta u will be common in all the terms. So whatever is in the bracket which is being multiplied by delta u, we call it as k prime matrix, and k prime matrix is this whole matrix, the original K matrix plus C over delta T square into mass matrix plus 3 over delta T into damping matrix. This whole thing was being multiplied here with delta U, so let's call it as K prime matrix. Similarly, all the constant terms, they can be taken on the right hand side here in the last equation, and whatever is on the right hand side, let's call it as a new or modified force matrix, and let's call it as delta p prime, where delta p prime is this whole thing. So equation 8 and equation 9 can now give us a way to solve the governing equation of motion, because if we can calculate this delta p prime, because all of the values required to calculate this are available or are known. Delta P of t is the difference in the actual force vector which is given between time t and t plus delta t. So this is the difference uh, between t and t plus delta t. The mass matrix is given. At any time instant t, the acceleration, velocity and displacement are given. So u of t, u dot of t and u double dot of t are given. We will use these values along with the original mass matrix, the original damping matrix, the original K matrix and the original P vector. We will use them to finally calculate delta U of t, the increment in displacement. So if we know the values at any time instant, we can calculate the increment in that displacement, and also this can be converted into increment in velocity and increment in acceleration also using the same equations. So at time t, we know the values, then we use the information to finally calculate the increment in those values. So we will add these values to the previous values and repeat the process for several times for all the time instants to finally get all the values of u dot and u double dot. But now these u dot, u double dot and u of t will not be one time functions, they will be basically vectors. So this difference will be there for multiple degree of freedom system. Otherwise the method will be exactly same as the single degree of freedom systems. So if I summarize this, and obviously you know that delta u of t can be calculated by simply dividing delta p prime of t with k prime of t. So this will be simply delta u of t. So you have to simply calculate delta p prime and delta k prime, in fact k prime, and k prime also is a function of the original k matrix, basically the instantaneous tangent stiffness matrix if the structure is nonlinear. The original mass matrix and the instantaneous tangent damping matrix if the structure is nonlinear. If the structure is linear, then K of t will be simply the original K matrix, C of t will be simply the original damping matrix. And U dot of t and U double dot of t, these are the starting values for any time instant. For the purpose of starting the process at time t equal to 0, these will be the initial conditions. And then from initial conditions you calculate the increment, you add them to the previous values and keep on repeating this calculation for all time instants. Finally we get the complete u of t vector, complete u dot and u double dot of t vectors. If I summarize that in a flowchart process, I will just explain in a couple of minutes. But we now know that this equation, equation 8, which is the simple equation now, this equation is similar to the static equation of motion. It is having the same form as F is equal to KU, this F equal to this K into U. So the form of the equation is like a static equation, and U can be simply calculated as F over K. But this process should be done for each time increment in a loop, and then finally you get all possible values of U and you can construct the U vector. So this K prime and P prime can be interpreted as the effective dynamic stiffness and the effective load increment. And we used two assumptions in this process. The very first assumption was that the C of t and K of t remain constant during a time instant t and t plus delta t. So within a time increment, the values remain constant. So it's piecewise linear assumption. The second assumption we did was that acceleration u dot dot varies linearly between time t and t plus delta t. So the whole method is based on these two approximations, these two assumptions. And since we assume that the acceleration varies linearly, therefore this method is called the Newmark's linear acceleration method. If we do a different assumption, that will maybe result in a different method. So these assumptions are basically the source of errors in our calculations. And since we have to perform these calculations for maybe hundreds and thousands of time for actually calculating the complete u vector for all the time increments, so these errors they can accumulate with the calculations, repeated calculations, and if they accumulate enough, they can sometimes result in unstable solution, and sometimes the solution can just drift away with each cycle of calculations. The solution can drift away from the actual solution, the accurate solution, and therefore we may end up in having a very large accumulation of error at the end of the calculations. So this is a big concern while using the the step-by-step direct equation increment, step-by-step direct integration methods. So if I just summarize the method for this Newmark's linear acceleration method, the steps would be that you start with some u of t and u dot of t which is known at maybe t equal to 0. You start the process and these will become your initial conditions. They can be 0 0 also for the first time increment. Then you evaluate the instantaneous, or you can say the tangent stiffness matrix and the tangent damping matrix if your structure is nonlinear. If your structure is linear, in that case this k of t and c of t will be constant. So if we calculate k of t, we can also calculate fs and then we can also calculate fd. So the first step, just like the single degree of freedom systems, is to calculate the instantaneous values of stiffness and damping. The next step would be to impose the dynamic equilibrium condition at time t to calculate this u dot dot of t. In fact, this is not a mandatory step in this whole process, but because we already have an equation which will give us the increment in acceleration, and we can calculate, we can start with a starting acceleration and then calculate that increment and then add it towards the end of the calculation process. But in order to reduce the error, since we have already given with the applied force and we have calculated the damping and elastic restoring force vectors in the last step. So one additional step we can add here is that why not we calculate the acceleration vector by just imposing the equation of motion. So we know already the equation of motion, that is mu dot dot plus C matrix into U dot vector plus K matrix into U vector is equal to some P of T vector. So if we take all these two terms on the other side and then divide with the, in fact take the inverse of the mass matrix, we can calculate U dot dot vector with all of these things known at the start of a particular time step. So if we impose this equation of motion to calculate u dot dot, instead of calculating the increment at the end and then adding to the previous acceleration, we will reduce a source of error, and we will ensure that if we put that flow chart in a loop, every time the loop runs, the equilibrium is imposed as a result of this additional step. The next step would be to calculate k prime and delta p prime, and then we can take that, calculate delta u. This is equation 8. Then we can calculate delta u, the increment in the displacement vector, as k prime inverse into delta p of t. This will result in the delta u vector, and then once we have delta u, we can also calculate delta u dot. Now this is the same equation which was the result of the linear acceleration assumption. That was, I think, equation, let's see, what equation number was it? I think equation 7. Yes. So this is equation 7, that with a given delta u, we can calculate delta u dot, which means that if we know the increment in displacement and the previous velocity and acceleration, we get the increment in velocity. So we can use the same equation to get delta u dot dot vector, delta u dot vector, increment in velocity, and then if we know the initial velocity and initial starting displacement, we add this increment in velocity and increment in displacement to get u dot dot t plus delta t. Now the process will again be started from t, time t, and we will just replace this starting values of the displacement and velocity with these new values, and then increment is calculated, add in the previous values to get the updated value. These updated values at t plus delta t will serve as a starting value for the next loop of calculations. So this way we can calculate the acceleration for each time the loop is run, and also the velocity and displacement, the updated values each time the loop is run. So if we just run this process for all time increments, we can get the acceleration, displacement and velocity for all time instances. In fact, the vectors for acceleration, velocity and displacement for all time instances. One important consideration for the use of step-by-step direct integration methods is the delta t. This delta t is uh, an important factor which affects the accuracy of this method. Generally, the delta t over capital T should be in a range of 1 over 5 to 1 over 10, where capital T is the natural time period of the structure. Now, for multiple degree of freedom systems, we know that the structure will have, if we have the n degree of freedom system, the structure will have n time periods. And the first one will be the longest one, and the nth one will be the shortest time period. Generally, the errors will start accumulating if the delta T over capital T is in the range of 1 over 1.8 or more. So, to avoid this unstable errors accumulation, delta T must be made short relative to the least period of vibration contained in the structural system. If we have a 5-story system and the time periods are 5 time periods, then we should use the shortest time period, the least time period, which means T5 in this place. So delta T over T5 should be in a range of 1 over 5 to 1 over 10. In fact, should be less than this number, 1 over 5 or 1 over 10, if we have to reduce the accumulation of error. So this delta t is sometimes also governed by the p of t force vector, because sometimes this p of t vector is numerically defined. It is not a function of, you can say, some mathematical function representing the force. Sometimes it is a numerically defined force vector. So if it may be like this t and p of t, and for different time increments t0 and 0.01, 0.02, these values are defined numerically for maybe some amount of time. So in that case, delta t will be governed by the delta t of the numerically defined force vector p of t, but it should be small enough if we have to reduce or avoid the accumulation of error in the step-by-step direct integration. Let's say that if we have a t1 which is 800 times of the nth mode's time period, in that case, and let's say that we have the delta t over capital Tn as 1 over 2, in that case we can simply say, we can replace this Tn as 800 into T1, and that will result in delta T over T1 as 1 over 1600, which means that the structure will require in fact 1600 time steps to complete just one cycle of the first mode. So this is just one example to emphasize the fact that you should not use T1 or the longest time period to check whether your delta T is small enough or not. You have to use the shortest time period. So shortest will be the for the nth mode. So delta T over Tn should be small enough. And if you just check in terms of the first mode in this particular case, you will see that one cycle in the first mode response will have 1600 time steps to calculate just one cycle of the response in the first mode. If a n-story structure, or let's say a 5-story structure, will have 5 time periods: t1, t2, t3, t4 and t5. T1 may be 5 seconds and t5 may be 0.05 second. Maybe t2 can be 1 second, t3 can be 0.3 second, and t4 can be maybe 0.1 second, and t5 can be 0.05 second. So let's say that you base your delta t selection based on t1. So you say that, okay, my delta t over capital T, which is 5 second, should be in this range, 1 over 5. Now delta t according to this criteria will be simply 1 second. If you just take 5, you can cancel this 5 and it will be 1 second. Now which means simply that if you have a 10 second uh, 10 second of the applied force, you are just dividing it into 10 parts. Now the response of the structure will have contributions from all 5 modes, and T2, T3, T4 and T5 are less than 1 second basically. So when you are using a very large delta T, you are expected to just not be able to capture the response of T3, T4 and T5. So that's why you should use the shortest time period here in terms of T to select your delta T, so that you can capture the response of all the modes, and your delta T should be small enough to actually capture the response for all modes. One last consideration about this error accumulation in the step-by-step direct integration is the concept of the artificial damping. Let's say that your solid black line is the exact solution, the actual solution. And let's say that your method which you are using for the step-by-step direct integration method, that is resulting in these dotted line with marks. So these dotted line with marks is in fact your calculation result, which is coming from step-by-step direct integration, and the solid black line is your exact solution. There can be two scenarios. One is that your solution method is is underestimating the actual response, which means that the oscillation amplitude predicted by the solution method is lower than what it is actually, which is the first case. And in that case, the accumulation of error will be such that the response will keep on reducing with number of cycles, and this will be equivalent to having an effect like having an additional damping, because additional damping will result in reducing the response with each cycle. So if the accumulation of error due to your analysis method is such that the response is reducing with number of cycles, we just hypothetically call it as a system having positive artificial damping. And that damping is not an actual damping, that is a numerical damping, which means it is just a concept which is invoked to account for or understand a phenomena which is actually resulting due to the accumulation of error in the analysis method. The second possibility can be that the error accumulates such that the actual values which are predicted by the analysis method are higher than the exact solution, and it accumulates with number of cycles, and the error will accumulate with number of cycles such that the difference, the overestimation in that case will keep on increasing. So we can hypothetically say that now the effect of error is such that the system is having a a negative artificial damping or a negative numerical damping. Negative damping means that uh, the the amplitude is increasing with number of cycles. The error is such that it is resulting in an increased amplitude compared to the exact solution with number of cycles. So the first one is called the stable accumulation of error. The solution will be stable, and the second scenario will be called as the unstable solution. Unstable solution, because with the number of cycles, increasing number of cycles, the response prediction will keep on reducing and it will not shoot out for some hypothetically large values. But in this case, for unstable solution, as the number of cycles increase, the solution will keep on deviating away, more and more away from the exact solution, and finally it will result in a very, you can say, hypothetically large response, which will actually be wrong. So this second type of solution, or error accumulation, is not desirable. So we always want that our accumulation of error is such that we result in a stable solution, or we result in a positive artificial damping, not negative artificial damping. So our desirable scenario is that for important modes that may contribute significantly to the response, for example the first few modes or lower modes, we want either zero numerical damping, or if our method have some numerical damping or accumulation of error, that should be positive. For for important modes, we want zero damping or near zero numerical damping. But for unimportant modes like higher modes, which may have very less contribution towards the dynamic response, we want that we have only positive numerical damping, so that the solution is suppressed with increasing number of cycles, and since those higher modes will have negligible contribution, so uh, we will not result in very inaccurate results. So sometimes the zero numerical damping is not possible to attain. In that case, we try to have positive numerical damping. We always try to avoid the unstable solution or negative artificial damping. So we want a calculation algorithm that always produce positive artificial damping regardless of the values of delta T over capital T. Such kind of a algorithm or analysis procedure which always result, or which ensures that there will always be positive artificial damping regardless of whatever value of delta T over capital T you use, we call such an algorithm as the unconditionally stable algorithm. One of a very common or very famous unconditionally stable algorithm is called the Wilson theta method. Wilson theta method. And maybe next time we will just have an overview of that. It is an algorithm which always result in the positive artificial damping regardless of what delta T over capital T you use. So it will simply invoke an additional step in the same step-by-step direct integration method to ensure that the error is always on the side which we want it. So maybe in the next lecture we will see that additional step which will ensure that unconditionally stable algorithm. So now I will explain to you, or in fact I will just show you an example MATLAB code which in fact automate that flow chart which I just showed you for an example force vector. In fact that you can say example code is for a ground acceleration vector. We know that the ground acceleration case can be converted into the applied force case for multiple degree of freedom systems also. So P effective vector will be simply minus mass matrix times the influence vector 1 having all the entries equal to 1 times UG dot dot vector. So now you know already that how to convert a ground acceleration case for multiple degree of freedom systems into a forced random force case. So with given P effective, which will be now numerically defined because UG dot dot of T will be numerically defined. It is basically defined uh, by the numerical values of time and the ground acceleration that will be recorded from some past earthquake. So that data will be numerically defined. So delta t will already be fixed or governed by the numerical definition of the ground acceleration, and you can multiply that with minus mass matrix into 1 to come up with a vector which contains each entry of that vector will be of a time function. So that vector will be the applied force vector. So each entry, just think of each entry as one function, but that function will be random and that will be numerically defined. The amplitude of that each of the entry will be different depending upon the multiplier which is multiplied with the UG dot dot. The time history of each will be same, but the amplitude will be different depending upon the number which is here. So P effective force vector can be replaced with P of t vector, which we just see in the flow chart, and then we can use the same step by step direct integration for ground acceleration case also. So let me show you an example MATLAB code which in fact automate this flow chart for the Newmark's linear acceleration method, and it solves it for the ground acceleration case. So let's say that let me open it here. Okay, this is the example MATLAB code. Let me quickly explain that. It starts with the close all, clear all, CLC, and some information displayed for the program. This program determines the seismic response of a multiple degree of freedom system using step-by-step direct integration method. So the given data is that the K and M matrices are given. So these two lines of code in fact define the K and M matrices. And let's say for the construction of C matrix, we have the constant damping ratio for each mode, and that is 5%. So I fixed that damping xi equal to 5% for each mode. It's a 5-story, 2-dimensional shear building. So the K and M matrices are 5 by 5. So this will simply display the M, K and xi values first. Then we have again the eigenvalue analysis, although it is not required. So let me just skip that one because the same code I use for plotting the mode shapes also. So let me just skip it because we don't need it now. We will directly go to the forced vibration response, which will not have any role from the mode shapes concept. Here, this piece of code in fact formulates the damping matrix, damping. So C matrix will be calculated from M and K matrices. So I use basically the modal damping approach to formulate the C matrix. For modal damping, we still need the mode shapes, although step-by-step direct integration doesn't require, but for formulation of modal damping matrix, you need the idea of mode shapes. So for that also, I just keep the previous eigenvalue code also. So C matrix is formulated using modal damping approach. Then this piece of code basically reads an Excel file which contains the ground acceleration data. So this command data is equal to xls read ground motion dot xlsx. This is the name of the file which is in the same folder. Let me open that. This is the name of the file ground motion. If I open it, it will just display me the time and the ground acceleration data for an example earthquake. So you can see here. So this file have just 2 columns populated with values. First column is the time column and second column is the ground acceleration in terms of G units, I think. So just these ground motion can be read. I think it has some maybe 53 seconds of data. Yes, 53 seconds of data is there, some more than 2000 data points with a delta t of 0.002. So you can see here 0.02. This is the delta t for this data. So this is numerically defined. It is directly given or available from past earthquake record. So this command will simply read that file and will just extract these two columns. One will be the time column, other will be the ground acceleration column. So first I simply plot the ground acceleration using these plot command to see how it looks like. And then it also extracts the total time duration of the earthquake and the delta t of the earthquake, which is 0.02. It displays that. Now let's start the step-by-step direct integration method, which is the Newmark's linear acceleration method. So all of these steps in that flow chart are available here. So these are implemented here. First of all, I put a loop on I equal to 0 with an increment of delta t up to t total, which is around 53 seconds. So which means that whatever piece of code I write in between for and end, that will keep on repeating for all the I values, and I will have an increment of delta t, and it will go from 0 to total time, which is 53 seconds. So whole of my flow chart will be these few lines of code, which basically is being calculated different steps of that flow chart. First of all, we have Fs and Fc, the you can say the damping force and the elastic restoring force. Since we assume that this is a linear structure, so K and C matrices will be constant. So K and C matrices will not be updated after every time increment, they will remain same. Then the ground acceleration vector is extracted from the data. GA is the ground acceleration, and now the vector is formulated for 5 different stories. Then it is converted into P of t minus 1 times the mass matrix times the ground acceleration times the g units. Similarly, the ground acceleration vector pt1 is basically the next time instance value. So we have first the index and then index plus 1, which means that this is at any time instant t, and the next line is the time instant uh, t plus 1. Then this uh, pt1 is basically the force vector at time t plus 1. Pt is the original force vector at time t, and pt1 is the force vector at time t plus 1. Then their difference is basically delta p, and then u dot dot, basically this is the where we are imposing the equation of equilibrium, because this is the mass inverse matrix times the p of t minus fs minus fc, which is the damping force. So this line is basically imposing the equilibrium equation to calculate the acceleration. Then this is k prime, this is the other one, which is p prime, and then we calculate delta u, which is the inverse of k prime into p prime. Then we calculate delta u dot, sorry, and then we add the increment in u with the previous value to update the value of u, and this is the update the value of velocity. So these 5, 6 or few lines are basically implementing the complete flow chart, which I have just shown you here in this slide. So you start with M and C and K matrices, then you calculate acceleration by imposing the equilibrium, then calculate K prime, delta P prime, K prime inverse into delta P will be delta U, and this equation will be used to calculate delta U dot, and then the U and U dot values are updated by adding these increments with the previous values. Same thing is done here. And then every time a new value of u and u dot is calculated, they are stored in a capital U and capital UT matrices. So end will result in the end of that particular time step calculation, and then again the loop will run for I equal to 0 to t total with an increment of delta t. So if there are like more than 2000 time steps, the loop will run for more than 2000 times. Each time it will calculate a u and u dot, and it will be stored in a capital U and u dot vector. Then uh, each each entry in the capital U and U dot vectors is basically plotted, and that will become the displacement for each story. Each row, or you can say each entry in the U vector, is plotted uh, as a function of time, and then it will become the time history or the total displacement for whole of the story. So this piece of code basically plots that capital U values, and this will become the story responses for each floor. The displacement is plotted. And then once you get the U vector, you can also extract or convert it into interstory drifts. You can use that to calculate the story shear, the overturning moments, and some other results also. So I will just skip it, and now I will run it to show you some of the results which it is giving you. So I run it now, and let me go to the main MATLAB, you can say the command window. It is still running. Okay. So now let me go from top. First of all, it says that this program is determining the seismic response of a multiple degree of freedom system using step-by-step direct integration method. The mass matrix is printed here, the stiffness matrix, the modal damping for each mode is 5%, the natural frequencies and time periods, although we don't require it as part of the solution method, but this just reports that. The normalized modal matrix. Now, the total duration of ground motion is 53. The time increment was 0.02 seconds, and then it simply gives the maximum displacement at each story and the time instant at which that maximum displacement occurs. Let's now check the figures which it plotted as a result. First is the same figure, which is the mode shapes, but the second figure is the ground acceleration, the original ground acceleration which was given as an input. So this is some 53 seconds ground acceleration vector. It is the El Centro ground motion. And then this figure 3 is basically the displacement, the response displacement for all of the 5 floors. So you can see here that they all look very similar, which means that the structure is primarily responding. uh, you can say the story displacements are almost in phase, which means that when the uh, top story is going towards the right hand side, all the other stories, the bottom stories, are also following it. So if I just overlay, maybe let me try it. This is the actual ground acceleration, and this is the story displacements. Basically the U vector is plotted for all time instants. So let me just maybe expand that as just to have a comparison. So now you can see here, maybe let me put it here, almost on the same, you can say, level of expansion or same scale. So you can see here that there are some ground acceleration peaks at the start, and the structure is also, all the stories are also having relatively larger peaks of displacement, and then some peaks here. So the structure also are going to have the same peaks, and also you can see the trend is very similar. The ground acceleration uh, have almost a similar shape, just like the structural response also. One more observation is that, as expected, that the top story have the highest deformation, and as you go towards the base, because the base is fixed, so the base have the lowest deformation. So you can also, I think, write your own program to automate this same flow chart, and you can produce some results similar to that. This code also displays the maximum value of displacement at each story and at what time instant that maximum value occurred. In this case, almost at the same time instant the maximum values occur, which means the whole structure displays with a big increment in displacement at that particular time. But it is not necessary. Sometimes different stories will have different, uh, they will have peak displacements at different times. These are the maximum story shears which have occurred for each story, and obviously they will also be at different times, but these are the maximum values which occurred during the whole time history at each story. Similarly, overturning moment, the bending moment, and also the maximum interstory drift, this first column of the values, and the interstory drift ratio, which means the relative displacement between stories divided by the story height. The maximum value occurred during the whole 53 second is reported here. So there can be some other results also which you can extract, but this is just an example piece of code which gives you an idea that how you can automate quickly this relatively complex looking flowchart for step-by-step direct integration method. So I think with this my demonstration is over. If you have any questions, you can ask now. Please check how I formulate the damping matrix, and I mean, in programs you know that there are more than one ways uh, in which different calculations can be performed. Uh, I would encourage some of you, if you can develop a graphical user interface, that will be more fun. Obviously, I am directly fixing M and K matrices. I mean, all of the data which is here, this is directly given by myself. It is not taken from a user. So M and K and Xi is directly fixed. In programming language, we call it I hard code that value. So it is not a desirable practice. Whatever value is being used as an input, programmers make sure that they are coming from users, or if they are fixed, they make sure that the programmers know how to change them. For example, you know, in eTabs there are a lot of code factors when you automate the design. So code provides capacity reduction factor, strength reduction factor, load factors, this factor, that factor. So they don't hard code that factors in the programming language. They actually fix them, but they basically define them in the preferences of the program. User can change from those preferences if they want to change a particular number. So although they kind of taking them from preferences, but they ensure that user can change those preferences. So if someone from you can develop a general program where user can actually define how many numbers of degrees of freedom, and then enter the mass and K matrices according to that, or story stiffness and story masses according to that, that will be more fun. Similarly here, when I import the ground acceleration file, this one here, now I directly fix the t total equal to 53 seconds and delta t equal to 0.02. But if I would have given some more time, I would have directly extracted it from the data itself, because I am reading the Excel file and the data is being imported in MATLAB. So delta t and total duration should ideally be directly taken. I mean, no need to just fix it according to this particular ground motion only. Whatever data you put it in that file, the program should be able to completely read it. Uh, by the way, I know how to do it. I mean, if I just type size of GA, size, uh, size of GA, this will simply give me the number of entries in the ground acceleration vector, and that will become my total duration or total number of steps. If I subtract one time increment value with the other one, I can get delta t also automatically. And then delta t multiplied by number of time steps, number of total steps should be equal to the duration of earthquake. So currently I just directly fix this code according to one example, but someone from you can make it more general also.